Happy Thursday, y'all. Yes, I said Thursday. Okay. Hope y'all staying hydrated like I is. Coming on real quick. Currently doing me a little red light therapy. So I thought I'd just sit here in, the middle of my shenandoah before I go in meditation and share some with y'all that I think I can speak about it now. Well, actually, I know I can speak about it now because a lot of things have been observed, time has passed, space has fulfilled, as well as energy has healed on my end. So I want to share with you experience that I had about 10 years ago. So for some who may not know, I started my journey, a different divine path, a new, as we would call it. And where that led me to at the end of it, well, is now, yes, but at the beginning, it was a lot of ego deathing, okay? I had literally gave away my whole last 20 years of my life, adult life, at that point. The only thing I kept with me was my son. um, and that almost was about to let go of, and I'll get to that in a minute. But what ended up happening is, so I want to say around late summer of 2016, I was living, on my own, had a household, Scottsdale, Arizona. And something in me had made me ponder, was it time to finally move forward in a vision and a dream and what I felt like was a calling to go to Brazil and set up shop and establish and all the things. And I waited. I didn't make any sudden moves. I waited and I waited and I waited for years because I didn't first get the inclination until like 2013. And I was still married at the time, and I was still on the other side of the country actually. But flash forward to 2016, 2017, I was finally on my way. I had got confirmation, affirmation, and some more things to let me know, and physical, confirmation, multiple physical confirmations that it was time to leave Scottsdale, Arizona. Keyword. I'm thinking it's going to Brazil. Something said leave Scottsdale, Arizona. Okay. So I give away my entire condo, my all my belongings. I may have stored like 10 boxes worth of things. And put that in storage. And that was it. So I literally left Scottsdale, Arizona and ended up in Miami, Florida about 8 weeks later. Yeah, 8 weeks later, with passports in hand, tickets, 8 to 10 suitcases, big suitcases. Y'all would have thought it was like Coming to America when Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall had all their luggage. But that was all I was willing to take to this journey to Brazil. I had left working, I had left everything, and I had been invited to Brazil. I had been invited to stay for at least 6 months. So I think I ended up buying a one-way ticket there. And at this time, this is all pre-COVID. So all the things were different then, including luggage and everything. Got to the MIA airport. And that's when I got a call from the clients in Brazil had canceled our trip to Brazil. Now, remember, I just said I gave away everything, including my condo and all that. Left friendships, colleagues, acquaintanceships, so-called family behind, all that. And get to that airport, the MIA airport. with son in tow, luggage in tow, and to be told, yeah, we don't need you because, we got some other traumatic things that are happening in our world right now and we can't receive you. So we're going to have to cancel the 6-month agreement. Let me just say this real quick. My initial response was that, well, I'm not leaving this airport. I'm not going back to the world I knew. I'm not going back outside of this airport and trying to figure life out at this point. Because I had enough money saved to get us there and sustain us for about 6 months because I knew the cost of living at that point in Brazil and all the things. I had done my research and, all the things that I was supposed to do. And I was like, okay, then I'll set up shop and then I'll start this and this and this and that. And I'll establish citizenship, residency or something. And that way I can extend my stay because Brazil at that time was still a little stringent on not only entry visas and those prerequisites, but also your intentions of staying and then how you could establish residency. So, and I wasn't really thinking about the marriage part yet, like I didn't want to do marriage, residency, or citizenship. But at any rate, so I'm sitting up in this airport with my then teenage son. And I asked him what he wanted to do. Like I said, I'm not leaving this airport, but I will help you do what you need to do because this is, he shouldn't have to endure my choices at this point with, now it's a whole, he's been on his own, he's been an only child all his life. He's always had his own space, his own everything. And to come from that to now we're sitting here at this airport figuring out what we're going to do with the rest of our life at this point. And to say the least, my son has been my ride or die. He has. In the capacities that have proven over the last decade, even if he needs to get to an international airport gate and tell them, hold up that plane, my mama's coming, don't you move this plane. Oh, I'll get to that in another story. This was in Indonesia one year. I'll get to that in another take. But at any rate, focusing back on this situation in MIA, it took us 2 weeks to figure out what we was going to do. I was not willing to do a hotel and they had a hotel inside the airport, but I wasn't willing to do that. I didn't want to do none of that. I knew that when I parked my truck in that covered parking in the MIA parking lot, I was not going to be coming back for it. I even left the keys in the truck. I owned the truck outright. I had the deed in the glove compartment. The insurance was covering all that stuff for the next 5 months. But I just knew that I was not coming back to that car. And it was a good car. It was a Pathfinder, Nissan Pathfinder. Good. It was a gas guzzler, but it was still a good car, good truck. So I was like, I'm not going back. I'm staying in this airport until I figure this out. So then that's how we ended up in Aruba. But then I was like, okay, but I can't sit in Aruba like this. So we ended up back in Miami, that Miami airport, because I still hadn't figured out where in the States I was going to go. I was like, well, I'm just going to stay in the MIA because I can't go anywhere else in the States. I don't want to be anywhere else. And I already lived coast to coast for the last 15 plus years of my adult life at that point. So I know I was not going to go back. I couldn't go back to none of the places that were familiar or none of the places I know. And I couldn't go back to any of the people because a lot of things happened in terms of my eyes opening. The wool was being pulled from my eyes and I was actually able to see people for the masks that they had pulled off long time ago. And just a lot. It was a lot. So I literally felt alone. I had one individual at that point in time that I could call on, and I'm grateful for the resource, the space that they held for me, and all the things. But here is also where I notice a lot of women of America are in exile. They still, like, I can't tell you how many women I came across in the airport that were was called unhoused. Oh God, it was just horrible. So that situation almost broke me, and that was, I think, my last time that I felt like I ever wanted to unalive. I had been battling with unaliving, the tumultuousness of wanting to unalive myself for years prior to that. Years, very, very what they consider suicidal. I just never went through it, but this particular, I think, was what broke me, because I was like, I done lost. It felt like lost everything when I'm stepping out on faith. And I was literally going through every layer of my mind, like, how and why did this happen, when I knew this was a divine element and calling for me to move and get to Brazil. What in the hell happened to where I'm sitting here in this goddamn airport with my teenage son, and we having to start and figure out life all over again? Now, mind y'all, I had been admonished to leave working 9 to 5s about a year prior to, and I was taken care of for that next year and a half. So I wasn't worried about that, and it was more or less. I even toyed with that. Am I supposed to go back into the workforce? Am I supposed to go back and do the rat race thing that I have been already doing for all of my adult life and most of my teenage years when I was legally able to work? And the answer kept saying, no, you just need to sit still. And the thing that kept coming back to me at that Miami airport was that situation. If I don't know, y'all ever seen Cicely Tyson in the movie Idlewild, when she was parked and sitting in the middle of a dirt road or out, yeah, dirt road, and her car had stopped or whatever, and Big Boy had handed her a whole wad of money, something like that, because she said, the Lord told me to sit here and just wait. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And she had her grandkids in the back, and they were sweating, it was hot, and all that stuff. But Big Boy came through there trying to figure out what was she doing. And this was like set in the 1930s. Anyway, he gave her a big wad of money. And it was like that right there was a catalyst that saved her life. So in my space, I was thinking, okay, I can't go back. I'm being compelled to sit here in this airport. And it kept, I shall not be moved. That's the gospel song, I shall not be moved, kept playing in my head. And I was like, okay, either I'm Delulu or I don't know. I was like, I got to be crazy all the way now. But at this point, I was like, okay, but I got to unalive myself because I can't do this anymore. I've lost everything. And by this point, I'm already in my late 30s. I already been through a divorce. I already been through several miscarriages, a couple of abortions, the living, all over the country, of my own volition, of course. Head household, the single mother struggles, the spiritual warfare and attacks, all the things. And I was like, I'm over it. I'm over it. And I made one more phone call, and I was like, okay. I think what really broke me was my son was asleep. We were sleeping, and we had to hide to sleep in some places while we were in the airport, because at that time it was still safe for the airport, for women to be in the airport, but it was still, you had the cops and TSA still trying to act like they run the space. So let me tell y'all what I did to keep them from on me, because we would have the sheriffs harassing my son. They didn't frisk him, but he just stood up like a man to one day, and he was like, well, what's the problem? He said, there's no problem, but you keep disturbing me and my mom every time we're having a seat somewhere and we're trying to figure out life. My son he wasn't quite 17 yet. So at that point, I was like, okay, this is a situation where we still fresh off in my mind, it just was not a safe situation for the sheriffs just to be around, just, on their e-bikes or whatever, harassing us. And TSA, same thing. I went to the director of the airport. I think that was his title. And I asked him, I said, do my son and I have permission to stay here at this airport until we figure out what we're trying to do? We have connected with a couple of homeless shelters in the area for housing assistance, but they're letting us know that they only focus on refugees who are coming across on the boat. They're not really helping citizens. And especially if you're not Latina, they're not really here to help you. And so that was our debacle and our plight. He looked at me, handsome guy, very handsome guy. He looked at me and he just gave me the smile of grace and he walked off. He didn't have to tell me that I had his permission. He just walked off with that graceful smile, and that was it. And from that point on, I didn't have any more issues with the sheriff's department or the TSA because we had already been back for about a week after our trip to Aruba, and it was what it was. So I was willing to send my son back to his father in Tennessee at that point. Now, I had been in no contact with his father because there was a lot of toxicity that was happening from his end, and I just didn't have the bandwidth for that anymore. And I didn't want to put up with that. Co-parenting was not an option, not a healthy one. And what made me get to the point of unalivement was we one night had to sleep in one of the private office spaces that airports sometimes have. And my son and I were sleeping on the floor and it was cold. Now this was like, it wasn't winter time yet, but it was cold. Well, maybe it was. I don't remember. Yeah, it was around just after the new year actually. That year. And I also had just learned my cat dad because I had a cat. Some may remember that I had my cat when I was in Scottsdale, Midnight Sun. I had let someone adopt him before I left. And like a couple of days before Christmas, I called the lady and she said, oh, well, she took him to animal shelter because she had just been evicted. I'm like, girl, why would you want to adopt my pet knowing that you were facing eviction out of your apartment or whatever? What is going on? So I had to call the animal shelter. And when I called the animal shelter, they told me that my fur baby had went over the rainbow because he had suffered pneumonia. I'm like, that's a crock of shit if I ever heard. He was a healthy, all black cat. But then again, I know the truth about black cats and animal shelters too. So I learned all that before Christmas. So that just really sent me over the edge and spiraled. So getting back to seeing my son sleeping on the floor, and it was a little cold in that room. And I was like, okay. And he had a blanket under him and all that, but it was still the point. I saw him shivering from the coldness on the floor. And I like, this can't be us. This can't be us. We done came from goddamn North Scottsdale, Arizona. And we up here in a fucking MIA airport on the floor. There's no motherfucking way. So I was like, okay, I'm finna end it all. I'm just gonna buy my son a one-way ticket to his father and, just let them know that he's on his way. And I'm just end it. I was over it. I was so over it. Oh, I was so over it. I didn't tell my son this, but I just looked at him in the middle of the night shivering in the cold, and it just broke me. I was crying and I was ugly crying. Ooh, child. I was, So I'm trying to think what ended up happening. I think that one source of individuals that was holding space for me, I reached out to let them know, okay, listen, I'm sending my son to his father. I want you to handle this and I want you to handle that. These are my last living will and testaments over the phone. I ain't have nothing else except a suitcase. I'm going to send these suitcases to you. They got this and that and, disperse of it as you will. You can keep with it. And then that friend was like, you are not going to do this. I'm like, yes, I am. I said, because I cannot continue on like this. I've had enough with life on earth. I really have. And they said, okay, well, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to call a colleague that I know may be receptive to having you and your son come. And, you guys can figure out, I was like, okay, where is this at? Because if it's, it don't feel, if, okay. I had to shut up too because my ego was still kind of there, but it was like, I just don't want to do this. And so we ended up hacking up. One of the shelters finally called us and was like, okay, we're going to give you a one-way ticket out of Miami. And then, we're going to send you there and so on and so forth. I was like, okay, that's fine. But we had to have an established, address to have us sent to. So we did that and made it out there, out of the MIA. And that was about a total of 22 days living in the MIA airport. Now, getting back to the women, there are a lot of women who are exiled in America. I can't tell you how many women I came across who were exiled in that airport, just that airport alone. And they were my age, a little bit older, some were younger. It didn't matter. And no, it did not have just a certain ethnicity or background. I saw women of all backgrounds. Exile in the airport. It was heartbreaking. Like, I would come across some women who were just sitting in their chairs. I had seen them around a couple of days and I knew they was pushing, and it was a difference between me with all this luggage with the intentions of travel, as to them, this is all they had left and they had nowhere to go, and they were still just aimlessly roaming around the airports. Not a lot of them were, out of their head or, crazy or anything like that. They still took care of themselves. They still wore makeup. They still, did whatever changes they could and all the things. And this is before Lumi deodorant, okay? So we was all sitting over there doing the bird bathing, okay? I also saw women who worked in the airport or for the airport, in some of the airline concession stands, I guess. And there was this sisterhood. Oh, it was such a beautiful thing to observe. There, once I started, so 6 months later, or actually a few months later, I ended up leaving America altogether, and I did end up in Brazil. That's the beautiful thing about all of that, is that I did not unalive myself. I still ended up in Brazil with my son for about a year. And we returned to America of our own volition, and then left the country again to go and, be in Southeast Asia, and then left again to go and live abroad in the Middle East. So I'm saying all that to say I appreciate seeing two things: that there is still a strong sisterhood amongst women in our species and even in our society. And it was a genuine communal sisterhood. It wasn't just this performative space. Oh, we're sisters. Oh, we're friends. Or the friends of guilt or trauma bond, meaning that they know your dirtiest, darkest secret. And so in order for you to make sure they take that to the grave with them, you have to maintain friendship with them. No, it wasn't that. It was a lot of sister soulfulness connections that I was able to observe. And that's a beautiful thing. I love to see it. I also, going back to the women who are exile, what ended up happening to my vehicle is that there was a lady who was a native of Miami, and her family, oh wow, her family had put her out of the house 2 days before Christmas. Based on what they say and what she told me, is that she left a spot on one of the dishes that she was supposed to wash, and they was just, fed up. Now, it could have been a few other things. I don't know. But ultimately she showed up at the airport. And I remember looking at her when she first came in, and she didn't have anything but her small little coin purse and a business suit on. And that's what she had to wear going to a job interview. And I was, she was telling me, it's a job interview I have, and, this is sitting me situation is setting me back. So I can get to the job interview, but I don't know how I can, establish anything else and, just maintain if they decide to hire me, because I don't have any clothes. This is all I got on right here. And she wasn't begging me. This was just conversation. She didn't know anything about what I had. She just presumed I was sitting there just, trying to figure out life too. And then I told her, I said, okay, you have a driver's license? And she said, yeah. I said, what's your driving record like? She said, it's good. I've never been in an accident and so on and so forth. I'm very responsible. I was like, okay. And, she still didn't put it together that I was about to do what I was about to do, which was, I said, okay, so my vehicle is parked in this spot in covered parking of the airport. And you should have saw the light in her eyes, the tears that was falling from her face, the hug she gave me, all the things. And I was like, the deed is in the glove compartment. It's insured for the next 5 months. So I want you to go straight to, what was it, the DMV or I can't remember if it was a tax office or the DMV she would have to go to get the deed switched over into her name. I said, but that's my actual deed. It's not a copy. That's the actual certified deed of the car. And it's owned outright. It's not had any problems. And I've taken very good care of it. I got the maintenance record inside the glove compartment also. So everything that you need to know about the vehicle is sitting in the glove compartment. It's already cleaned out and everything. She left and proceeded to call me maybe a couple hours later just to make sure, that she had a couple of questions about, if it needed an oil change or needed to have fluid toppage and all the things. And I said, yeah, everything's fine. Just look at the last maintenance record of everything that was done for the vehicle. Because I drove that mug from when I was living in Savannah all the way to Scottsdale, Arizona when I moved there. And I, drove it around while I was living in Scottsdale. And then I also drove it from Scottsdale to Miami, Florida. So it was fine. But on my little light therapy and went off something going meditation, y'all. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you all because that's something that, and it's many other layers to that whole experience that I could get into, and maybe I will, in other, dives. But I just wanted to share that with you because here it is in retrospect, 10 years later, and I'm seeing that there's still a lot of women of America who are exiled for various reasons. Some of them, it could have been prevented. In other cases, there was nothing that could have stopped that. But even on a spiritual level, it's a walk that, you're going to go, and I'm saying you're going to, because it's just the beginning for a lot of individuals and women too in America. And it's going to hit you in a way, and I'm not trying to say this as a doom and gloom. It's a message that I know, unless some individuals are willing to make the shift, destitute times will happen in their reality. That's the best way I can put it without sounding like I'm intentionally trying to curse anybody. So the communal aspect is going to be very pertinent at this time for this species to survive. Not individualism. And this is coming from a hermit. an isolated hermit. I'm an individual who's a hermit, has been a hermit for a very long while in these last 10 years also. Um, but a communal space, a communal mindset, I'll say it like that. So even if you're in the space where you don't really want to be around other human beings, you don't want to be around the best versions of themselves. That's how it really is. It's not, and I'm saying this as a person, I've heard myself say I don't like people. I know I've said it. It's not that I don't like people. It's the element of refusal to not evolve, the socially engineeredness, the individualistic mindset, and the capitalist mindset of people that I prefer not to be around and have access to me, and I not be in their space either. So I don't hate humanity, because at that point in that airport, I did say, fuck a hope for humanity also. I was all off the wheels at that point. But again, I came back to me and I got into divine understanding of what that whole experience was about. It wasn't so that I could, get into the mindset of bitterness either. It was to understand that there is still a hope for evolution of humanity, right? It's not even about the hope for humanity. It's still the understanding that there is grace that is still given, because I was given grace, even in that space, I was given grace from the divine, from the people that I did come across, because it wasn't all bad in that space of being unhoused in the Miami airport. It wasn't all bad. There were some beautiful things that did happen, and I don't think I would have got those experiences had I been working a 9 to 5, had been sitting by my nice little cream castle in Scottsdale, Arizona, North Scottsdale, Arizona, pushing around my SUV, right? And I wouldn't be as spiritually open and malleable, and also mature in being able to move forward in the divine path that was set forth before me in that space. So there was a revolution that happened, and I say that, and I'm gonna close, is that before I even got on the road and moved from Scottsdale and gave all my things away and sold stuff off and all that stuff, the individual let me know, and it was a trusted source of it was tri-spirit with spirit, and it came in a few spaces actually. But one of the messages was, it's time for you to do a revolution in South America. And this individual didn't know anything about me, didn't know, and it wasn't remote viewing or anything like that. They didn't know my intentions or none of that. And so early that day I had done like a meditation or prayer and, asked for, confirmation, so on and so forth. And that was one of the confirmations I had got later on. So that let me know, yes, there was supposed to be a move forward towards South America. And specifically in my case, because I was like, this is what I needed to know after years of thinking about it, understanding it, contemplating it, waiting for the message, waiting for the affirmation, waiting for the divine message to move forward to get to Brazil. The revolution was not to be televised. The revolution was an inner revolution of self. And that is something I didn't get until I actually got to a certain space in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in the rainforest. I'll get to that in another story. But anyway, I hope this was enlightening. I hope this was entertaining. I hope this was helpful. I hope that this share inspirational. But yeah, there are a lot of women at that time who were exiled in America, and it's still happening. It's just that I was one of those women who in exile understood my assignment from the divine. And I cannot be swayed, moved, or coerced to know, believe, or think otherwise. So I'm grateful for this space. I'm grateful for the experience. I'm grateful for it all. And this is where, when it's scriptural, you will count it all joy. This is where I count it all joy. Okay, y'all stay delicious and twinkle twinkles. Peace.